She wiped tables in a small Los Angeles cafe where nobody remembered her name. A man in designer shoes sat by the window, quiet, watching her with curious eyes. When she spilled coffee on his sleeve, the manager yelled loud enough for the whole room to hear. The man said nothing, just smiled faintly, like he'd seen this story before. Before we jump into today's story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next one. Morning light spilled through the smudged windows of Harper's Cafe, slicing through the haze of espresso steam and quiet exhaustion. The place was busy. City workers, students, tourists, all lost in their screens or their silence. And somewhere between the sound of clinking cups and the hiss of milk frothers, Emiko Tanaka worked like she was part of the furniture. She'd been there 3 years. Same tables, same uniform, same invisible rhythm. No one knew she had a degree in architecture. No one asked why she was always tired. To them, she was just the waitress with the accent. That morning she noticed him, a man sitting by the window alone. Dark suit, expensive watch, posture that didn't belong in a place where the air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and hopelessness. He wasn't scrolling his phone like the others. He was watching, not in a creepy way but in a quiet, almost respectful one. When Emiko approached his table, her hands trembled slightly from hours of overwork. She smiled the kind of smile you wear when your rent is late and your boss is watching. "Good morning," she said softly. "Coffee?" He nodded, eyes kind, accent unplaceable. "Black. No sugar." Moments later, as she turned to deliver the cup, her wrist brushed a passing tray. The hot liquid splashed across his sleeve. Silence fell, sharp and instant. The manager's voice broke through the room like a whip. "Emiko, for God's sake, can you do anything right?" People turned. A few smirked. One laughed quietly behind a latte. Her chest tightened. Her throat burned, but she said nothing. Just reached for napkins, apologizing over and over. The man didn't flinch. He dabbed his sleeve, looked up and said quietly, "It's fine. Really." But the manager wasn't done. "I should take this out of your paycheck. You think mistakes don't cost money?" Something in the man's expression changed. Not anger, but recognition. Like he'd seen this performance before. The rich berating the tired. The powerful scolding the powerless. The moment stretched. Emiko's hands froze midair. And for a heartbeat, the entire cafe felt like a stage. One where humiliation was routine and empathy a luxury. The man leaned slightly forward. "Sir," he said calmly, "I told you. It's fine." But the manager rolled his eyes and stormed off, muttering under his breath. Emiko turned back toward the counter, her cheeks red, her eyes low. The man just watched her, his face unreadable, but his silence heavy. Outside through the window, sunlight caught the golden letters painted on the glass. Harper's Cafe, family-owned since 1978. The irony stung. When she returned with his check, the man smiled again. "Don't let him talk to you like that," he said softly. Emiko blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. Before she could answer, he stood, left a generous tip, and walked away, his quiet presence lingering longer than the scent of coffee. As the bell over the door chimed shut, she whispered to herself. He looked familiar, but she didn't know yet. The stranger she'd just served was about to change everything she thought she knew about kindness, justice, and power. The cafe was empty now. Just the hum of an old refrigerator and the flicker of a dying neon sign reflecting off the rain-slick sidewalk. Emiko sat in the back booth with a crumpled apron and a handful of coins that barely made a sound when she dropped them onto the table. She stared at them for a long moment, her reflection swimming faintly in the metal surface of a teaspoon. Tips from 12 hours of labor, 12 smiles forced, 12 insults swallowed, 12 coffees gone cold. Her hands trembled as she stacked the coins, not from fatigue, but from the quiet ache of invisibility. No one saw her beyond her mistakes. No one asked if she ate lunch. To them, she was just the waitress who spoke softly, bowed slightly, and never complained. But tonight, even the silence felt heavy. She walked out into the street, the city air thick with drizzle and distant sirens. The neon from the cafe sign washed her in red and blue, colors of exhaustion and endurance. That's when she saw him again, the man from earlier, standing under the awning, hands in his coat pockets, the faintest smile beneath tired eyes. He wasn't the kind of man who looked comfortable standing still, but there he was, waiting. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, she froze. He spoke first, his voice low and calm, carrying the kind of warmth that didn't need volume. "How long have you been working here?" Emiko blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. "Too long," she whispered, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. He nodded, as if her answer told him everything he needed to know. The world around them moved on. Cars, footsteps, laughter. But the space between them stayed still. He glanced at her small paper bag, her dinner for the night, a half-eaten muffin, and said quietly, "You deserve better." The words landed like something fragile, something she hadn't heard in years. Not a compliment, not pity, just truth spoken gently. She didn't reply, didn't trust her voice not to break. But when he offered to walk her to the bus stop, she didn't say no. They walked side by side through puddles reflecting the city lights, saying nothing for a long time. At the stop, he paused. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly. "For what?" she asked, puzzled. "For living in a world that lets people like you go unseen." Her throat tightened, and for the first time that night, she met his eyes fully. There was something in them she couldn't name, understanding maybe, or regret. As the bus approached, he stepped back, hands in pockets again, his face half hidden by rain. When she boarded, she glanced back through the fogged glass. He was still there, watching, not out of curiosity but something deeper, something that made her wonder who he really was, and why he cared. That night, as the bus rolled through the city, Emiko looked out at the lights and whispered, "Maybe kindness is the rarest form of wealth." Morning light poured through the same cafe windows that yesterday had watched her humiliation. But today, the street outside was a storm of flashing lights, microphones, and shouting voices. News vans lined the curb, reporters pressed against the glass, and curious strangers gathered to watch the chaos unfold. Inside, employees whispered in disbelief. Emiko stood frozen behind the counter, a coffee cup trembling slightly in her hand. She could see him through the glass, the same man from last night, the one she'd thought was just another customer. Only now he wasn't just a man in a dark suit. He was Ryo Takeda, the billionaire heir and new owner of Harper's Cafe. Her heart pounded. The world around her blurred into sound and motion. The same people who had ignored her now rushed to the windows, pretending they had always treated her kindly. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Her heart pounded. The world around her blurred into sound and motion. The same people who had ignored her now rushed to the windows, pretending they had always treated her kindly. The manager, who once barked orders at her like she was disposable, straightened his tie and smoothed his hair, his voice suddenly soft, almost trembling. "Mr. Takeda! I had no idea you'd visit our location. If only we'd known." But Ryo didn't look at him. He was scanning the cafe until his eyes found her. That same calm, grounded presence, kind, but heavy with something deeper now. He stepped inside quietly, cameras flashing behind him. But when he spoke, his tone was measured, respectful. "I came yesterday," he said, eyes never leaving hers, "to see how my people are treated." The room fell silent. Even the espresso machine seemed to stop hissing. Ryo turned toward the manager. "Yesterday, I watched you yell at this woman for an accident you caused. You humiliated her, in front of customers, without reason." The manager's face drained of color. "Sir, I didn't—" But Ryo raised a hand, not in anger, but in quiet authority. "I wasn't here as your boss. I was here as a customer. And what I saw was not leadership. It was cruelty." He turned again, this time toward Emiko. Her eyes glistened with confusion, humility, and disbelief. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You deserve better. Every worker here does. I built this company because my mother once stood behind a counter just like this, working 12 hours a day so I could have a future." Emiko swallowed hard, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. No one moved. No one spoke. The room seemed to hold its breath. Ryo continued, "Starting today, this cafe will change, from wages to respect, and those who can't honor that will no longer represent our name." The words landed like quiet thunder. The manager backed away slowly, his authority dissolving in silence. Emiko's lip quivered, tears threatening to fall. She whispered, Why me?" Ryo smiled faintly. "Because sometimes, the smallest act of grace, like how you apologized even when shamed, tells me everything I need to know about a person." Outside, the cameras kept flashing, but inside, the moment was sacred, too human for headlines. And as he left the cafe, Emiko realized this wasn't just about money or power. It was about seeing people again, about dignity being restored in the most ordinary of places. She exhaled softly, watching him disappear into the crowd, her reflection glowing in the window that once made her feel invisible. By sunset, the cafe no longer sounded the same. The tension that once lived in every corner, the whispered insults, the sharp orders, the cold stares, had vanished. In its place was something fragile, almost unfamiliar. Respect. The manager's nameplate was gone from the counter, his angry voice erased like chalk after a storm. The staff stood together in uneasy silence, still processing what had happened that morning. And in the middle of it all stood Emiko Tanaka, the woman they'd once ignored, now wearing the same apron, the same shoes, but somehow standing taller. When Ryo Takeda returned that evening, he came without cameras or bodyguards. Just him, his quiet presence filling the room more than any speech could. He looked around, nodding slightly, then walked up to Emiko. "You ran this place with dignity," he said softly, "even when no one offered it back." Emiko shook her head, her voice trembling. "I just tried to survive," he smiled. "That's exactly why I'm asking you to lead." For a moment, the room froze. Every head turned toward her, some with disbelief, others with shame. Ryo continued, "This isn't charity. It's correction, fairness, what should have been yours from the start." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. Not the kind that come from sadness, but from something deeper. The realization that someone finally saw her. All those long nights, those quiet humiliations, those times she bit her tongue instead of speaking. It all led here. She nodded slowly. "I'll do my best," she whispered. Ryo smiled faintly. "That's all you've ever done." He left soon after, stepping into the cooling air as the cafe lights flickered on behind him. Outside, the city moved as it always did. Honking cars, rushing people, the endless rhythm of modern life. But through the glass, he could see her already in motion, organizing, leading, training her co-workers with the same grace she once used to endure them. Under the cafe's soft neon glow, she wasn't invisible anymore. She was light. Later that night, when the last customer left and the doors were locked, Emiko stood by the counter, tracing her finger over the new schedule she'd written. Her name, printed neatly at the top, still felt unreal. She looked out through the window. Ryo was standing across the street, leaning against a lamppost, quietly watching. Their eyes met. No words, no grand gestures, just two people who understood that real change doesn't begin with noise. It begins with decency. He gave her a small nod, then turned and walked away into the city night. Emiko exhaled, smiling through tears. The hum of the fridge, the soft buzz of the neon, even the faint aroma of coffee. It all felt different now. Because somewhere between humiliation and hope, something had shifted. Not just in the cafe, but in every person who had witnessed what fairness looked like when finally given form. As she flipped the sign from open to closed, the reflection in the glass stared back at her. Steady, certain, alive. For the first time in years, she didn't see a waitress. She saw herself,